Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Marketing with Nathan A. Webster's podcast. I'm your host, Nathan A. Webster, and I'm excited to chop it up with you today. Today, for episode 58, I want to focus on social equity 1919 mural in Northeast Portland with the godfather of marketing, Portland, Mr. Kent Lewis. What's up, Kent?
How's it going? Pleasure to be with you once again. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, the pleasure is all mine. And I'm excited to chop it up with you in regards to the social equity mural in Northeast Portland. It's a project I'm currently working on now on a different project. But what you sent me somewhat goosebumps, if you will, that we are having some hard dialogue, you know, otherwise known as, say, uncomfortable conversations. But I'm going to call it a dialogue. So I'm looking forward to chopping this up with you, man, because I know you have a story to tell.
Yeah, so thank you. I'll try and get to it here. We'll call it 2 months ago. I took my team to Top Golf in Hillsborough. And one of my buddies I grew up with since we were like 3 feet tall, playing soccer together as young kids. We stayed friends all these years. We went to high school together up at Garfield in Seattle. His dad is Kenyan, his mother is Austrian, so he's mixed race. So he has a very unique perspective on life, more so than if he was fully black or fully white. And he's built and sold businesses. He's a pretty amazing guy. And so he reached out to me via text. Was this a photo of your team on Instagram at Top Golf? I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's like, something missing? And I was like, what? He's like, nope, any POCs? And I'm like, hey, dude, that's a long conversation, man. And so, long story short, he didn't want to hear what I've been doing for 20 years to try to be a more inclusive company and recruit proactively, because we're still, even though we're 50-50 male and female, we're still, other than a guy with an Hispanic background, different parts of his family, it's a white crew. And his message was, you can do better. Whatever you've been doing isn't enough. And as much as I didn't like hearing the message, or maybe I didn't like the delivery, I took the message to heart. And so within a week, like I was like, we're a 12-person company. I'm not going to go replace all my white people with people of color to make my buddy happy. And that's not necessarily what he's asking, right? But we started, when we were recruiting, we started post on HBCU job boards. For those of you that aren't woke, it's historical Black colleges and universities. Zero response. And I know from a much larger company here in town, Instrument, with 300 plus employees, they had the same response, and they have Google, Microsoft, and Facebook as clients, high profile, but they're insulated within the industry. They're not out there on the ground talking to folks in the South, Southeast about careers in digital. So I was like feeling a little lost. Meanwhile, I was pitching Facebook and another brand about NFTs. And I collaborated on a shoe pitch with an ex-Nike designer to do a collab shoe that he mocked up for me as an NFT. And after that experience, they didn't greenlight the work. They weren't ready for it yet. They liked our idea, our concept, but he came back to me as a graphic designer a month and a half ago and said, I think NFTs are cool. Never heard of them. Thanks for the opportunity to pitch the business with you. But we should do something with NFTs that gives back to the community. So he came up with some ideas like little 3D printed figurines that kids would paint. He did that with SEI when he was at Nike as a fundraiser, maybe virtual sculptures in the virtual world of NFTs. But what we settled on was a mural. And I said, hey, I've got a 60 by 30 foot back of my building that we could paint a mural, and there's nothing right next to us. There's a big parking lot. And so I brought in an NFT developer and then an event company, and 4 white guys. And we came up with the idea of the mural. And then I said, what I would like to do is tie it, having been nudged by my buddy up in Seattle, to acknowledge the neighborhood in which we are living in Northeast Portland and working. So I had just read an amazing article in the Atlantic magazine about the whitest city and the whitest state in the country from 2016, citing a PSU professor and a bunch of other experts on the very racist history, the founding of Oregon, the 1919 rule that forbade realtors from to selling certain real estate to in certain neighborhoods to blacks, African Americans. And so it's really a 2 by 4 mile corridor where blacks are allowed to buy, which is basically the center of that point is Albina. And back before I-5 and the Coliseum and the hospital, Emmanuel, there were 1,500 homes that were predominantly African American. Basically, blacks were relegated to this neighborhood, and then it was gentrified massively. I-5 took out 1,000 homes. The Coliseum / Moda took out 450 homes, and then you've got the gentrification of Williams Street, Williams Avenue, and the corner of Williams and Russell was the historic center of the Black community, and that whole building, beautiful building, was raised in the 70s to make room for an Emmanuel Hospital expansion that never happened. So it's been a grass lot ever since then, ever since I've been in Portland in the mid-90s, and I never knew why. Why hasn't that been developed? It's the city owns it or the hospital, and they've done nothing with it. So they took down a vibrant neighborhood for progress. And then there's another professor, and there are links that we'll include that are on our website for this mural about the systemic economic and the tools they use economically to keep Black neighborhoods poor and underserved. And then at some point it becomes so run down that the whites can come in and redevelop and make a killing on it, while the Blacks not only lose the homes they owned or rented, they're pushed out of the city. And that's gentrification, by design. After I read those two articles, one's an article, one's a very long research paper, I decided I had to do something. And this was I'd already committed to the mural at this point. But the night I read the Atlantic article, I turned to my wife and I said, we have to sell our half of the building that our tenants want to buy ASAP. So we have a salon that's owned by an African-American couple that had been in here 4 or 5 years, and they were interested in buying. And 2 months ago, I said, yeah, down the road, no problem. And only 2 weeks later, I said, let's start talking immediately. That article changed my view. If I can do anything, it's bringing Black ownership back into this neighborhood that was predominantly Black and was thriving and has been definitely dispersed and distributed and more or less weakened by all of the economic development. So we're working on that right now. So the mural is basically called 1919, is honoring or acknowledging that dark past of social inequity and systemic racism that prevented Blacks from owning, and then making owning here almost untenable with lack of economic support and maintaining the neighborhood and policing and whatever else. And so that's what the mural will do, but it's not a traditional mural. It's a grid of colors showing kind of a grading from white to Black and grayscale to show like how the city has darkened, particularly after the war. And then the vibrant colors representing the bright future we have as a unified, inspired group. So the mural will be painted on September 25th. As a community. So hopefully you'll be there, Nate, with your kids, helping roll on some of these grids. And we're going to add QR codes so that we can get access. People can take pictures and know exactly what the story is. We do have a website. Well, we bought nftmural.org. There is a temporary site at godaddysite.com, but it's nftmural.godaddysite.com, and it has all the information, the backstory, information about our sponsors. First Tech Federal Credit Union underwrote so far 100%, but we need more sponsors to cover. We want to hire ideally 38 artists. Right now we have 3. Pay them all to do a grid and a piece of digital artwork that'll be part of the NFT, which we'll talk about. And then also we have 3 music acts that are going to be performing, and we want ideally maybe a couple more. So we're looking for another 20 to 30 grand to cover that. It's exceedingly expensive. That way, 100% of the proceeds can go directly to our charity, which is Friends of the Children Portland, which helps underserved youth for a 12-year mentorship longitudinally that shows massive success rate. It's just hard to scale without funding. So we want to help them. So a lot of resources on the site to tell more of that story. The NFT is simply going to be a way for people to own the mural that's on the side of a building. You can't own a mural, right? You can own the building, but you may not even own the mural, or it disappears, it's gone. So the NFT will include video, photography, interviews with the people that are painting, with the artists. And that'll all be part of the NFT and the website experience. Then we'll sell like posters and other elements for the physical stuff for those old school folks that don't want to know what an NFT is, don't care, will never bid on an NFT, don't have an NFT wallet, don't even know how to go to a marketplace and buy something that's NFT. I've never bought an NFT, but hopefully I will convince a few of my friends to in September. But that's basically the journey. So I took it my way. And I do want to say one of the other things I've learned to impart is that BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And the Indigenous is intentional because they, like Blacks, have endured a significant amount of hardship compared to other people of color or compared to any dumbass white person that says they've had it hard. They don't know what it is if they haven't had the person of color experience. Now, I will say my heart is very close to the Native American experience. Incidentally, we were originally 4 white guys. I brought in a Black guy that's a technical recruiter at Special and Diversity, a Native American, and a couple females, ladies, to help us manage this via committee. So what I've learned as a white guy, if you're going to do something for good, you should be the amplifier, not the voice. We're providing a platform for the artists, for the musicians, for the community to be a part of this community and communicate the dark history, but mostly a bright future. What can you do? How can you act? Albina Vision Trust has given us some great, they're amazing resources, a website as a group. What they're doing economically to develop and redevelop this neighborhood, the Albina District, Northeast Portland included. But my goal has been to put myself in check, be humbled, and try to help give an opportunity for voice. And, you know, what's really come out of this, not to at all diminish the Black story, which is a primary focus of this mural, is the Indigenous people were here, you know, thousands of years, 10,000 years before we were. And they don't own a lick of this land. You know, and that's really a tragedy. It's really a genocide. There were 100 million Native Americans in the United States 400 years ago. Now there are 5.5 million. So that's a genocide. And then you've got African Americans stolen from their home country, their home continent, moved here between 12 to 18 million. There are now 45 million African Americans in the U.S. in a variety of degrees of shades, parlaying from that, right, and other mixed cultures and races. But that's grown. But the systemic problem of creating economic and police states that keep people down has really frustrated me as a white guy that realized I'm not as smart as I ever thought I was. I got handed things. Being a tall white guy with a short name, middle class, gave me advantages, Nathan, that you did not have. And so the least we can do is give back. So that's what we're doing with this mural, with this event. It'll be from 10 to 4. You'll be able to paint, listen to music, you know, support the charity nonprofit. We're bringing some food trucks. Of course, they're going to be minority owned. 3 things you probably didn't know about Native Americans, though. Number 1, don't ever use the word pioneer or pioneering or colony or colonization. Those are bad words for obvious reasons. If you can't figure that out, then I feel sorry for you. Another thing is they do not consider themselves minorities. That may be considered controversial to a minority, but they were the vast majority here when they were first here, and through sickness and systemic, you know, they've just been eradicated, for lack of a better term. Also because of that, you have to, when you go to the Indigenous people with an offer or anything, there's a whole process there, kind of like a Japanese tea ceremony, not to misappropriate yet another culture, but I reached out blindly and foolishly to a bunch of the native tribes. There are 3 main tribes or nations that have settled on this river and in this area in Albina. And I reached out to all of them, didn't hear a word. So I had to go through a friend of mine to get introduced to Robin, who I've been working with. And he's been immensely helpful in helping me translate this. And how do we work with these people, the peoples that were here long before us? I don't know if you knew, we went rafting on the White Salmon this weekend as a family near a place called Hewsum Falls. It's the highest navigated waterway that you can raft legally as a tourist. It's a 12-foot waterfall, and it's scary as hell.
Oh, wow.
But there were 1 million Native Americans up and down the White Salmon River It was basically, it wasn't a village or a town, it was a city, all the way down to the Columbia River. And native tribes from Alaska would track down to trade. And so there's no trace of that, not a hint that that was ever
Mhm.
there. So anyway, we can't solve all the problems, but we can start by just acknowledging everything from the Cascadia flag that everybody proudly waves as a timber fan has extremely racist roots, but nobody knows that. Nobody, most white people who live in Portland do not know the racist history. And so that's our job, is to get out there. And the NFT is just a little twist to raise a little more money, frankly.
You know, man, before I go into, I just want to make sure I have the date right. What I have the time 10 to 4, but what date?
September 25th. It's a Saturday.
Okay, a Saturday. And what's the address?
It is 310 Northeast Failing Street. It'll be on the corner of Garfield and Failing. Garfield is 1 block west of MLK.
And the zip code?
97212.
All right, so, woo, we don't have very much time, but I can make this short. I've noticed the lack of Black folks on your team, and I never said anything because I was like, oh, I know Kent is working on it. You can't really have, like, I wouldn't call you out unless we sat down like multiple times and I felt comfortable enough to like say call you out on that. And so I think that is so significant because I don't think there's enough people. When I see a Blue Lives Matters flag, I say to myself, like, man, I don't think those people have any Black friends. Like, really have any Black friends to call them out to say, yeah, of course, Blue Lives Matter. But guess what? So does firefighters, military, AMR, they all matter, but it's a uniform to be put on. And so when you said that you had that, when he called you out on it, it wasn't like you like raised like any red flag and you're gonna fight. No, that's not just, hey man, as a homie, just want to point something out. And I think that's where, like you're saying, and where I'm gonna jump to the Cascadia flag, I think a lot of people, being that it doesn't, nothing in their life, now I shouldn't say nothing, a lot of the things that as a white person you take for granted, we have to be on the lookout for just to ensure of our safety. And so when it comes to, as you were saying, with the Native Americans, the indigenous people, you know, there is a process because they still have their culture, for the most part, where there still are due processes. Unfortunately, in the Black community, we don't have that because that was literally erased when folks are taken on western shore banks and southern shore banks of Africa. And we were all then said, speak this language. There wasn't any remnants of what was left. And so, you know, the 23andMe, you can do that and figure it out, but it still doesn't give you back what was taken. And I think if more people spent the time to do this like mural, acknowledge like, wow, there were people before me, but it's hard to do if you're young. Not to say it can't, but when you start thinking like, okay, my time's going to be done, and how can I make it better? I've learned for the folks that want to make it better, they want to include the richness that came from other people, not just them. So that's just me. So I really appreciate that. So on Saturday, September 25th, this 1919 mural acknowledging Portland's history of segregation and displacement from 1919, I think is so huge. I don't think we talk about the history of other people's, the ones that were the losers in history gets to tell their story. And this is part of the story because we're not losers, but that's, you know, pretty much the deal is the losers don't get to tell their story. So I would say for those that are looking to see what this link is or what this is all about, I will have a link in the show notes page. And Kent, thank you for taking yourself on the journey because it is an extreme amount of humility. So thank you, my man. I always knew you had it in you.
Yeah, and you, just to point out, what I didn't go into detail is everything I have been doing. I have hired every POC that comes across my transom, for better, for worse. Well, it doesn't mean they want to, no matter how many offers I make, doesn't mean they want to work here. If they start here, doesn't mean they want to stay. It doesn't mean we're not going to stop trying to do this better each time. So, so anyway, so that's the important thing. But on our culture, on the about careers, and then we have about community outreach. We have a ton of what we've been doing. We support a POC scholarship fund for our industry. We don't, so the challenge is I can't hire from a degree. There is no degree in what we do. So we have to build these people or we have to go find them. And finding them is nearly impossible because they don't exist or they're very expensive. And I mean, of all colors and creeds. So it's a real huge challenge. So that's why I teach at Portland State is every POC that's come through there, I've gotten first dibs to make a case that they should consider Anvil, and that's where we've had our greatest success. But we will, we will keep trying new and different things as we go down that route.
All right, and I know you got to run, my man. So for the outgoing folks that want to connect with you, where can they find you at?
You can find us at anvilmedia.com. You can find me at Kent J. Lewis on the Twitter, and you can also find us at Anvil Media on social as well.
All right, awesome. And for all you listeners that were in tune last week, I'm going to tell you our podcast sponsor has changed. It is Let's Connect. Everything that Kent was talking about in regards to acknowledging what was lost, now we're acknowledging the folks who are here. So if you are a person of color, Black, Indigenous, BIPOC, I love how you broke that down, Kent. If you're a woman or if you are a veteran, and even if you are an ally, you are more than welcome to come to this conference. We only have a limited amount of seating. It is October 7th through 8th. It's a 2-day conference where it's all about encouraging each other and building each other up. So this is for what I went through 2 years ago, trying to find other BIPOC, women, veteran-owned businesses like myself in Vancouver, Washington. So all the details will be in the link in the show notes page. And for all you rocking, downloading, and sharing all this stuff from Let's Talk Marketing, I want to say thank you. Please make sure you go rate and review the show. And with that, Kent, I say au revoir. Thank you for being an awesome guest and dropping this. This is awesome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure as always.
Awesome. All right, my man. Will you take care, dream big, and Godspeed.